The platinum chain watch read 7:15. Evelyn fastened the last mother-of-pearl button in front of the mirror. The reflection in the glass had delicate features, with two unfathomable pools of water settled deep in her eyes. On this same day in her past life, she had shattered the champagne glass at her engagement party. Shards of glass and splashes of liquor drenched Damian and Seraphina, while media flashbulbs froze the chaos into a headline. 2 weeks later, the board of directors sidelined her under the pretext of unsuitable mental state for duty. In the end, there was that car crash, her brake line cut. A message from Seraphina still lay on her phone, "Rest in peace, sister." It was the 9th day since her rebirth. She touched the long-vanished scar beneath her collarbone. In this life, she had done 3 things: found Silas, the economic crime investigator from her past life who had handled Damian's case but couldn't secure a conviction due to insufficient evidence, and, as an anonymous informant, provided 3 verifiable financial leads to earn his trust, found Pete, the mechanic at that auto repair shop, and traded a stack of cash and the blunt statement, "Someone wants to kill me," for a copy of the vehicle log. Then, over 7 nights, she reconstructed every account etched into her memory from her past life, approval numbers, call times, money trails, cross-referencing each entry against this life's public records to confirm the consistency of the paths. Only then did she begin laying this trap. Evelyn in the mirror curved her lips. 9 days of preparation, every step treading on the edge of a blade. Her phone buzzed. Damian's message arrived right on time. "Evelyn, nervous today?" "Don't worry, I've got everything under control." She replied, "With you here, I'm not nervous." She added a smile emoji. At the same time, her other phone received an encrypted email. The confirmation letter from the third-party regulatory body was in place, and the financial monitoring system would activate automatically at 8 o'clock tonight. At exactly 9 o'clock, Seraphina pushed the door open. Chanel No. 5 announced her arrival 3 steps ahead. "Evelyn." She bounded over and hooked her arm through Evelyn's, the rhinestones on her nails scraping against the silk sleeve. Her eyes curved into a sweet crescent, her smile tinged with just the right amount of allure. Evelyn's gaze landed on the small red mole behind Seraphina's ear. In her past life, she hadn't seen it until the very end, in a private investigator's photos. It had appeared on the pillow in Damian's hotel room, in every corner where she should have noticed it long before. "Seraphina, you've worked so hard all these years." Evelyn pulled her arm free and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Seraphina's eyes flickered. "What are you saying? You're my best friend. So today, I want you to submit this agreement to Damian. You're the person I trust the most." Seraphina took the gold-embossed document, her fingers tightening for a moment. "Evelyn, can I really do this?" "Of course." Evelyn placed another copy into her own handbag. "You've already reviewed the contents yesterday, haven't you?" Seraphina's face paled. Yesterday afternoon, she had indeed accidentally caught sight of the documents Evelyn had left on the study desk, and had photographed them for Damian. The two of them had double-checked 3 times. It was a standard, nearly dull joint investment letter of intent. The only unique element was that symbolic loyalty addendum: any party in material breach would forfeit all rights and interests and bear joint liability for damages. At the time, they had laughed out loud in the hotel suite. Damian had pulled Seraphina close. "This stupid woman, she really thinks signing some agreement can tie me down?" Seraphina's smile remained perfectly fixed. "Don't worry, I'll make sure everything goes beautifully." Evelyn walked toward the door. As she passed Seraphina, she paused for a moment, her breath brushing against her ear. 8 o'clock sharp. "I want everyone watching as you hand it to him." The door clicked shut. She pulled out her phone and sent Damian one last message. "There's a surprise for you at today's engagement ceremony." Sent. Turned off the phone. Switched SIM cards. Another phone lit up. The surveillance system test was successful. She pulled up a backup of the real contract, her gaze landing on Article 37's supplementary clause. "This agreement shall take effect upon signing, with the fund lock mechanism automatically activating at 20 hours on the same day. Trigger condition: any signatory initiates a transfer exceeding 30% of the agreement amount to a non-designated account within 24 hours of the agreement's effective date. Upon activation, all managed funds will be frozen for 72 hours, and the automated audit results will be simultaneously pushed to all reserved judicial and regulatory interfaces." The engagement ceremony was held at the Lin family's starry sky garden on the top floor. Crystal chandeliers illuminated every smile on every face with piercing clarity. Seraphina, in a champagne-colored gown, stood arm in arm with Damian at the guest registration table, the picture-perfect couple. When he spotted Evelyn, Damian stepped forward and feigned a casual hand around her waist, still wearing the same cologne Seraphina always used. Seraphina handed Evelyn a glass of champagne. Evelyn didn't drink, her fingertips tracing the stem of the glass. "Did you bring the documents?" Yes. Good. At exactly 8 o'clock, you'll hand them to me on stage, and I'll pass them to him. The three of us will sign together. Seraphina and Damian exchanged a glance, one of triumph, disdain, and barely contained excitement. Evelyn caught it all in her peripheral vision. 7:50. In front of the dressing room mirror, Seraphina paced, clutching her handbag. Evelyn turned around. Come in. Seraphina bit her lip. I'm a little nervous. Evelyn gently patted the back of her hand. What's there to be afraid of? It's just a formality. That agreement is only for show for the shareholders. My shares are due for a transfer this year, and I feel more at ease with Damian handling them. You two are the people closest to me. Seraphina's fingers loosened slightly. Evelyn pulled the papers from her bag and flipped to the signature page. See, I've already signed. Later, you just hand it to me, simple as that. Seraphina leaned in. Evelyn's signature was indeed in the party B's column. She let out a full sigh of relief, her smile turning sweet again. 7:58. The spotlight hit the main stage. Evelyn stepped up first, taking her place on the left side of the long table. Seraphina ascended from the right, presenting the documents with both hands. Evelyn took them and turned toward Damian, who was approaching from the side of the stage. She watched him open the cover, his gaze sweeping over the 37th supplementary clause. She had intentionally enlarged the font and stuck a pink sticky note on it. Damian, make sure to read this one. Damian's pupils contracted. He looked up at Evelyn, the spotlight casting his momentary shock into full, unmistakable view. What's wrong, Damian? Is there a problem? Evelyn tilted her head slightly, her smile gentle. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Damian's Adam's apple bobbed as he looked back down at the document. The black text on white paper was identical to the version he had seen yesterday, the same font size, and pink sticky note in the photo Seraphina had sent him. But yesterday, he had seen, either party shall provide 30 days written notice for mutual termination. When had it changed to fund locking triggers automatic audit? His fingers turned cold. Seraphina's smile froze on stage, her lips moving soundlessly. Evelyn leaned in, her voice low enough for only two to hear. Damian, all the guests are watching. Just sign it, it's only symbolic. Damian met her eyes, two icy flames sinking at the bottom of a deep pool. A flurry of camera flashes erupted. Music, applause, and the fizzing of champagne bubbles surged around him. Damian flipped to the last page with trembling hands, the pen hovering over the signature line as a drop of ink fell, spreading into a dark stain. He took a deep breath and wrote, a crooked Damian. Thunderous applause erupted from the audience. Seraphina clapped mechanically, her lips pressed into a pale, thin line. Evelyn was the first to extend her hand, grasping Damian's icy fingers. Pleasure working with you. She then turned to face the crowd, raising her champagne glass. Thank you all for being here. Cheers to our collaboration. From the corner of her eye, she spotted the man in the dark gray suit glance at his watch and give her an almost imperceptible nod. 8:01. The surveillance system was now active. The champagne tower at the engagement banquet refracted tiny shards of light. Evelyn sat at the head table, the three cold dishes before her untouched. She occasionally raised her glass to her lips. Damian's back was ramrod straight. Every few minutes, he pulled out his phone, its screen light casting his forced smile like waterlogged paper. On the other side, Seraphina chatted and laughed with the directors' wives, her voice pitched a half-tone higher, her hand gripping Damian's arm so tightly it seemed to clench. Evelyn, tonight's champagne was specially airshipped from France by Damian. Give it a taste, Seraphina said, tilting her head. No thanks, Evelyn set down her glass. I'm afraid I'd miss tonight's surprise. Surprise? Seraphina's smile flickered. Evelyn's gaze swept across the banquet hall, landing on a man in a dark gray suit. He was holding a glass of sparkling water near the champagne tower, looking like an unremarkable investor representative. You'll find out soon enough. Seraphina, you look absolutely stunning tonight. That dress, Damian picked it out for you, didn't he? The color drained from Seraphina's face. Damian was staring at his phone, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. I'm going to the restroom. Damian suddenly stood up and quickly disappeared around the corner. Evelyn pulled out another phone. A new notification flickered across the screen. Fund flow monitoring alert. Account Lin's Investment Development Fund made a single transfer of 35 million yuan at 20 hours 17 minutes and 32 seconds, with the receiving account being the offshore company Golden Horizon Ltd. This account is not on the pre-approved whitelist. The supplementary clause under Article 37 was automatically activated at 2000 hours, and this transfer has triggered a lock and automatic audit procedure. She lowered the screen, tapping her fingertips gently against it. When Damian returned, his face was as pale as rice paper. Seraphina stepped forward and lowered her voice. How did it go? He shook his head, the movement barely perceptible. Evelyn picked up the untouched glass of champagne and made her way toward the stage. Everyone, her voice came through the microphone, on this beautiful evening, I'd like to announce something. The lights converged. Damian stood rooted to the spot, his pupils contracting. Seraphina's forced smile began to crack. Just now, Lin Group and Huayuan Capital officially completed the signing of the joint investment letter of intent. At the same time, the financial regulatory system for the new investment fund went online at exactly 8 o'clock tonight. This system will automatically identify and lock any fund flows that do not comply with the agreement. Damian swayed slightly. Seraphina let go of his arm and stepped back half a pace, the heel of her high heel clicking against the table leg. Just a few minutes ago, the system detected a transfer of 35 million yuan, and the receiving account is not on the agreement's whitelist. The air in the banquet hall felt as if it had been sucked away. The string music stopped abruptly. Damian stepped forward, his lips turning purple. Evelyn, you. I warned you, Damian. About that supplementary clause, I even put a sticky note on it. Seraphina suddenly shrieked, this is entrapment. That money was a normal investment transfer. He had the authority, Evelyn cut in, her tone gentle, but not to transfer more than 30% of the agreement amount to a non-designated account within 24 hours of signing. The agreement amount is 50 million. 35 million, that's exactly 70%. Seraphina's lips trembled violently as she whirled toward Damian. Didn't you say there was no problem? Didn't you say that clause was still, when we checked it yesterday? Shut up. Damian gritted out through clenched teeth, his bloodshot eyes locked on Evelyn. What do you want? Evelyn set the wineglass down on the table, the base striking it with a crisp ting. She stepped slowly off the stage and came to a halt in front of Damian, close enough to see her own reflection in his pupils. What I want is for you to cough up everything you've swallowed. Damian abruptly raised his hand to grab her wrist, but two men who had slipped in through the side door seized him. The man in the dark gray suit stepped forward, the metal of his badge glinting. Mr. Damian, Miss Seraphina, Economic Crime Investigation Unit. Please cooperate with the investigation. The banquet hall erupted. Phones sprang up like mushrooms after rain, camera flashes exposing Damian's pale, twisted face without mercy. Seraphina collapsed to the floor, her champagne-colored gown pooling on the deep red carpet, her makeup streaked and smudged by tears. Evelyn stepped back, retreating into the shadows where the spotlight couldn't reach. She looked down at her hands, fingers clean, nails neatly trimmed. All right. She turned and stepped onto the balcony. The night wind filled her sleeves. The entire city lay spread out beneath her feet, lights flickering like a chessboard. She pulled out her phone, opened the contract back up, hesitated for 2 seconds, then pressed delete. 3 years and 4 months. The assets that Damian and Seraphina had jointly siphoned from the Lin Corporation had finally crossed that critical threshold. All she needed to do was shift the threshold to the very night they signed the contract, and rewrite the supplementary clause to be a little more accommodating. The balcony door slid open. A man in a dark gray suit walked over and handed her a warm cup of black tea. Surveillance data and audit reports have all been transmitted back. The chain of evidence is complete, enough for a conviction. Evelyn took the cup, pressing her palm against the warm ceramic. Thank you. Handle the public relations angle next. The man hesitated. You knew they would strike tonight? Evelyn gazed at the beacon light atop a distant building. They were too greedy. Greedy people never make it to the next morning. As Damian was led away, he turned back from the banquet hall entrance, searching for Evelyn in the crowd. She stood by the terrace, holding a cup of black tea, meeting his gaze through the floor-to-ceiling glass, and raised her cup to him in a toast. On the other side of the glass, Damian was pushed into the elevator. Evelyn turned around, a few strands of hair loosened by the night breeze. She casually tucked them behind her ear, pulled out her phone, and sent a group message to all senior executives of the group, urgent board meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. in the group headquarters conference room. Attendance mandatory. On the balcony, she was the only one left. The distant clamor grew increasingly faint. Evelyn leaned against the railing for a moment, then smiled, so brief and light that the curve appeared and vanished in an instant. She turned and walked back. The full-length mirror at the end of the hallway reflected her figure, shoulders straight, skirt smooth, except that the night wind had unknowingly brought a hint of color to her lips, a pale crimson like a camellia just beginning to bloom. Someone turned the corner. It was Damian's mother, Gloria, a long-standing board member of the Lin family. She strode over quickly in low-heeled shoes, her smile still in place, her brows arched a little high. Evelyn, what was that all about tonight? Damian, he. Evelyn paused, tilting her body slightly so the light fell on her face from the side. Aunt Gloria, you'll find out at tomorrow's board meeting. Gloria's lips parted, but Evelyn had already walked past her in the other direction. The sound of high heels gradually faded away. Outside the window, the city night was just coming alive. Neon lights tinted the sky with an ambiguous orange-red glow. 9 o'clock the next morning. When Evelyn pushed open the glass door of the group's top-floor meeting room, 7 people were seated inside. Gloria, in a navy blue suit, sat at the second seat on the right. Across from her was Harrison, an old stalwart of the Lynn family, his fingers tapping impatiently on the table. Evelyn took her seat at the head of the table, placing a stack of documents on the surface. Today, her shirt sleeves were rolled up to mid-forearm, revealing slender wrists, the watch on her wrist casting a cold gleam. Everyone's here? Let's begin. Harrison was the first to slam the table. Evelyn, after what you pulled last night, the stock price dropped 4 points at the open. Do you have an explanation? Down 4 points, Evelyn flipped open a file, unhurried. Uncle Harrison, you're very well informed. You knew the 15-minute opening data before the trading desk even did. Out of the $35 million that Damian transferred last night, $20 million came from the new energy project funds you approved in the first half of the year. The approval form has your signature on it. Do you want me to read it aloud here? Harrison's face flushed red, then turned ashen. Gloria spoke up at just the right moment. Evelyn, we're here today to solve the problem. Damian was indeed in the wrong, but he is still your fiancé. I've had the media take down the trending topic. As for how to handle the aftermath, you need to figure out the next move. Evelyn nodded. I do have an attitude. She pushed the file to the center of the table. Special Investigation Report on Lynn Group's Internal Related Transactions and Benefit Transfers, Volume 1. Over the past 3 years, funds flowing out of Lynn Group through Damian's hands have accumulated to more than 470 million yuan, involving 12 projects. Each project bears the signature of one or more of those present here. Faces around the long table changed color one after another. Harrison stood up, then sat back down. Gloria's fingertips began to tremble. The independent directors left the table one by one. In the end, only 3 people remained at the long table: Evelyn, Gloria, and Harrison. Gloria shed her gentle exterior, her gaze sharpening. What terms do you want? Terms? Evelyn stood up, tucking the file into her handbag. I don't need to negotiate terms. I just need to send the evidence where it belongs. With 270 million yuan involved, Uncle Harrison, how many years would that get you? She walked around the table toward the door, pausing half a step as she passed Gloria. Auntie Gloria, how much did you spend taking down the trending topic last night? I'd suggest you save up, there'll be plenty of places to spend money later. The door clicked shut. Underground garage. A young man in a dark gray jacket leaned against a pillar, holding 2 craft paper bags. It was the same guy from the Economic Crime Investigation Squad last night, only today he wasn't in uniform. Miss Evelyn, he said, handing over the bags, freshly steamed shrimp dumplings. You probably haven't had breakfast yet. A circle of grease stains seeped through the bottom of the paper bag, still warm. What are you doing here? Damian's lawyer has arrived, he said, pulling open the passenger door. He's asking to see you. He says if you're willing to settle this privately, he'll hand over all the details of the transferred funds and the account passwords. Evelyn slid into the driver's seat. When? Whenever. But only at the detention center. She turned the car key. Get in. We'll eat first and then go see him. The car drove out of the underground garage. The passenger in the front seat fastened his seatbelt. By the way, my name's Silas. Evelyn's lips curled slightly. I know. In the detention center's visiting room. Damian looked even more haggard than last night, his gray short-sleeved shirt hanging loosely on him. Evelyn slid the folder across the barrier. Sign this, and tell me the name and contact info of the person pulling the strings behind Seraphina. Then I'll consider giving you a lighter sentence. Damian stared at her for a long time. When did you change? A week before the engagement party, you were still discussing our honeymoon destination with me. Was it me who changed? 3 years ago, when you first siphoned off 2 million from the new energy project, did you ever think you'd end up sitting here 3 years later? Damian buried his face in his hands, and when he looked up again, his eyes were red-rimmed. The trader's name is Kyle, a Singaporean. Seraphina has his encrypted contact information. There should still be a backup on her phone. Evelyn logged the information. Behind her, Silas gave an almost imperceptible nod. Just as Damian finished signing the documents, he spoke up one last time. Evelyn, do you hate me? Evelyn had already turned around. She didn't look back. Hate is for those who still care. Damian, in my world, you're left with nothing. Stepping out of the detention center, the sunlight crashed down violently. Silas pulled open the passenger door. Seraphina's mother is holding up a banner at the precinct entrance, claiming you colluded with the police to frame her daughter. Evelyn got into the car and looked at the photo, white cloth, black letters, the Lynn family's daughter colludes with police to frame an innocent woman, restore my daughter's honor. She zoomed in for a few seconds, then started the engine, send Seraphina's mother her daughter's 3-year bank records, with every large deposit traced back to its source. Have the PR team ready, handle every reporter who shows up, and provide the complete transaction history to anyone who asks. Silas tilted his head, glancing at her. You're going to socially destroy Seraphina? She chose this path herself. I just showed everyone her choice. The car drove over the viaduct. The HR department called. Gloria had submitted her resignation letter, and Harrison had posted an open letter on the internal network saying he was deceived and willing to return everything. Evelyn pressed the speakerphone button. Hold off on Gloria's resignation letter for now. Keep a screenshot of Harrison's open letter. If he wants to return things, it must go through the proper audit process. No private settlements accepted. Freeze Harrison's internal network access for now. After hanging up, Silas asked, do you really not hate them? Evelyn glanced at him in the rearview mirror. There are many kinds of hatred. Mine is lighter in color, heavier in weight, and longer in its intervals of eruption. The car pulled off the ramp and stopped in front of a tea house. Evelyn unbuckled her seatbelt. That banner Seraphina's mother put up has already made it to the city's trending topics. I've set up a meeting with 3 top self-media operators. I'm going to tell them a story, every detail can be verified, and every transaction has a paper trail. They want to use public opinion to turn things around? Let me show them which side of the blade cuts whose flesh. She pushed open the car door. Plane tree leaves carpeted the ground. Silas watched her figure disappear around the corner of the stairway, lowered his head with a faint smile, and followed. Evelyn talked with the 3 operators for 2.5 hours. The story was densely packed with details. The approval number of the first 2 million Damian had transferred 3 years ago, the last 4 digits of the card Seraphina used that same month to rack up $870,000 in jewelry, the call duration and cell tower location of the late-night phone call between Gloria and Harrison, where they discussed how to make the project run at a loss. She didn't say she had lived through all this in a past life. She simply said, I've done my research. The girl in the black hoodie had red-rimmed eyes. Miss Evelyn, how have you put up with all this for so long? Evelyn pushed the cold tea aside. The longer you endure, the more complete the evidence. A scene needs enough footage to be edited beautifully. As she went downstairs, Silas stepped out of the next booth, phone in hand. Aside from contacting Kyle directly, Seraphina also used another encrypted app to message Harrison. The timing was exactly 1 hour after you gave her that addendum. Evelyn paused for a step at the stairwell landing. Harrison had known the content of the addendum since yesterday afternoon, so why didn't he stop Damian? Message content? Encrypted. The tech team said it's most likely Harrison asking Seraphina if there's any issue with that addendum article. Seraphina's reply was essentially, Evelyn personally said it's just for show, and she herself has already signed. Harrison knew about that addendum but chose to trust Seraphina's judgment. Greed led them to pick the most comfortable explanation. Each of the 3 thought they held a corner of the situation, but pieced together, it formed the complete picture of a dead end. After starting the car, Evelyn didn't drive off immediately. She leaned back in the seat and closed her eyes for a moment. Her phone vibrated. A new comment had appeared under the trending post about Seraphina's mother. Auntie, stop pretending. Don't you know how much money your daughter got from Damian? Last December 31st, at the Civic Client Appreciation Gala, who bought the Cartier necklace around your neck? There were over 400 replies below it. The trending topic, which had initially been overwhelmingly sympathetic, was starting to shift. Evelyn turned the screen towards Silas. Look. Silas shook his head. It wasn't me. Evelyn messaged X to check the registration. The reply came back. The phone number linked to the account was authenticated to Seraphina herself. Seraphina had registered an anonymous account herself and posted that comment after her mother's scandal trended online. Was she trying to drum up sympathy for her mother? Trying to change course when she sensed the tide turning? Or was it driven by some complex motive even she couldn't fully untangle? Whatever it was, that comment had become the fuse for a reversal. Back at the Riverside mansion, Evelyn changed into a dark green velvet shirt and dimmed the lights. 7 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Gloria stood outside, her hair slightly disheveled, holding a craft paper file folder with 3 strips of tape sealing the flap. She sat down on the sofa, silent for nearly half a minute. Inside this are several agreements left by Damian's father before he passed away, along with the private accounts he kept behind Lynn Corporations back all these years. I want to trade these for one condition: let Damian get a lighter sentence. Evelyn didn't reach out to take it. Aunt Gloria, state your condition first. If it's reasonable, we'll talk about whether this stuff is worth it. Gloria's lips trembled. I can hand over everything his father left behind, including the keys to those hidden offshore accounts. Evelyn, I'm not asking you to forgive him. She turned her face toward the riverview, unable to continue. Evelyn picked up the file and placed it on her lap without opening it. Aunt Gloria, I can consider it. But you need to answer one question first. She looked straight into Gloria's eyes. On the 16th of last month, Damian drove to an auto repair shop in the South City Industrial Zone. The owner of that shop is named Pete. Alistair helped him out back in the day. What did Damian do there? Gloria's face shifted from red to white, then to gray. Her lips parted, then collapsed into a single shake of the head, too slow enough that every frame seemed to reveal something. Her voice was as dry as sandpaper scraping across wood. I checked the dashcam footage. He deleted that segment, but the timestamp was still there. South City Industrial Zone, stayed for 41 minutes. I don't know what he did inside, but I know that repair shop, it does brake system repairs. Those last few words were so faint they were nearly swallowed by the wind outside the window. Evelyn didn't respond. The heavy dossier pressed down on her knees. She just watched that face under the desk lamp as it crumbled inch by inch, with nowhere to hide. When did you find out? After his accident. I went home and searched his car. The navigation history still had the address saved. I called that repair shop, and they said they didn't remember anything like that, but a place like that doesn't just get its records deleted for no reason. Evelyn nodded. In her previous life, she only uncovered this after she was hit. This time, she had Silas get hold of Pete's driving logs and surveillance backups in advance. But she didn't tell Gloria any of that. Letting her speak it out loud was more powerful than delivering the accusation herself. Aunt Gloria, I will verify what was said tonight. If it's true, I'll coordinate with the Economic Investigation Unit to seek lenient treatment for Damian. But there's one condition: from now on, you cannot do anything on Damian's behalf. Also, Harrison should call you tonight to ask you to issue a joint statement with him. When you answer that call, put it on speakerphone, record it, and send it to me. Gloria stared at the white tea leaves floating and sinking in her cup for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and dialed Harrison's number. She turned on the speakerphone, and Harrison's voice burst out, Gloria, I was just about to look for you. You heard what that girl Evelyn said at the meeting today. If we don't join forces now, everything the Shin family has accumulated over the years will be stripped clean by her. I've already had someone draft a joint public letter. Take a look at it, and we'll release it together tomorrow. Gloria glanced at Evelyn, who remained motionless, leaning back in the sofa. Harrison, send it to me for a look. You should still have the overseas channels Alistair used before his death, right? Before all the accounts are completely frozen, let's transfer a sum out first. Harrison lowered his voice. That line Alistair set up with Hong Kong back then, the 200 million project funds went through that shell. Now Evelyn is checking the visible cash flow. Once the money passes through that shell, it becomes completely untraceable. Gloria's knuckles turned white as she gripped her phone. Is that shell called Dragonrise International? Your memory's sharp, Gloria. You still have the account key, don't you? I have it. Send me the draft of the open letter first. After hanging up, the living room fell silent like a vacuum. Gloria placed her phone on the coffee table, screen facing down. Longting International, Damian's dad set up an offshore fund pool with Harrison. Harrison wanted you to transfer money in tonight to muddy the waters before the account gets thoroughly investigated, Evelyn said. I'll pick up the keys tomorrow. You need to completely let go of everything between Longting and Harrison. Gloria lifted her face, her eyes still red but tears already rained in. Evelyn, do you resent me for playing matchmaker between you and Damian back then? Evelyn paused for half a second. No. When you set us up back then, you did it with good intentions. A tear finally rolled down Gloria's cheek. She stood up, clutching her handbag, and at the entrance, her hands trembled so much while changing shoes that she couldn't fasten the straps. Evelyn knelt down and buckled them for her. Looking down at the crown of Evelyn's head, Gloria said, for the Lynn family to have a daughter like you, your parents are truly blessed. The door closed. Evelyn stood leaning against the door for a while, then walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window and sent a message to Silas, Gloria's gone. Tomorrow, go to her place to pick up the key to the Longting International safe. Check all of Harrison's recent call logs and financial transactions. The reply came, got it. What time tomorrow? She typed 2 words, she didn't say. 6:50 a.m. A brass key was handed over at the entrance of Gloria's villa, attached to a brown leather key ring. The safe is in the study on the 2nd floor. The code is the last 6 digits of Damian's birthday. Evelyn clutched the key and went upstairs. She moved aside the books in the bookcase, inserted the key into the lock, and turned it 3 times. With a click, the safe door sprang open. Inside, aside from trust documents and bank certificates, there was a black hard drive case, 2 handwritten ledger books, and an old-fashioned Nokia phone. The ledger covers were blank, the pages were filled with notes in blue-black ink, Damian's father's private accounts, recording every financial transaction of Dragon International. Nearly half of the entries were marked with the surname Zhao. Tucked into the last page was a sticky note. Harrison kept a copy, but 3 entries were altered in it. The real accounts are with me. At the bottom of the ledger lay a silver USB drive. Evelyn packed everything into a document bag. As she came downstairs, Gloria was peeling an apple, the skin falling in a perfect, unbroken spiral. She cut half and handed it over, and Evelyn took it. Walking out of the villa, Silas's car was parked at the intersection. He leaned against the car door, holding a cup of soy milk. Got it? The real ledger, hard drive, phone, and USB drive. What Harrison has is a fake account. 3 entries have been altered. Evelyn got into the passenger seat. What about your end? Silas merged onto the main road. At 3 in the morning, Harrison transferred $3,500,000 to his son's company account in the UK, labeled as a business consultancy fee, but the recipient has no service records. Seraphina's encrypted phone was cracked. There's a dated car crash plan memo with detailed dates, locations, steps, and contacts. There's also an encoded audio recording. The tech team downloaded it from the cloud, a call between Seraphina and the auto repair guy, Pete. Evelyn's fingers rested on her knees. Can the documents be used as direct evidence? Sure. Full timestamp, along with voice characteristic matching verifying Pete's identity, confirmed. At 9 in the morning, the first post went live on 3 self-media platforms. Seraphina, from best friend to suspect, a complete record of 3 years of bank statements. The inflow and outflow details were arranged purely chronologically, each transaction accompanied by a project number, approval slip number, and recipient. Comments exploded 15 minutes later. Some cross-referenced each entry on the account, while others took screenshots of Seraphina's luxury goods photos on her moments and compared them against the timeline. At noon, Harrison released a joint statement, several clarifications regarding the recent internal turmoil in the group. The gist was that while Damian did have personal issues, Evelyn's unilateral initiation of judicial proceedings did not conform to the company's governance standards. Evelyn, reading this in the independent director's reception room, had Claire lean in. Every accusation in his statement is directly refuted by the company's bylaws. Why on earth did he release this? Evelyn raised the teacup and took a sip. Because he wanted the outside world to believe he was still in control. At 4 in the afternoon, the second piece, tracking the capital flow of YUN Capital founder Damian, went live. It directly laid out core entries from the real ledger of Longting International, paired with Damian's approval slips, bank statements, and real-time monitoring screenshots of the 35 million yuan transfer from the previous night. The article ended with, the above materials have all been submitted to judicial authorities, and Damian himself is currently in criminal detention. In less than half an hour, Damian criminal detention was trending in the top 3. Under the trending hashtag featuring Seraphina's mother's banner, the top comment read, "Mom, how's your daughter doing in the detention center?" At 5:30, Evelyn walked out of the building. Silas's car was parked by the roadside. He pushed the door open and got out. Off work. Silas glanced at her and suddenly smiled. Shall we grab a meal to celebrate Harrison being taken away, or Kyle getting caught? Both. As they crossed the river, the sunset was just sinking, painting the entire river surface amber. Evelyn turned her head to look out the window. The curve midway along the riverside road flashed by, the guardrail freshly painted white, glaringly bright in the twilight. She watched the bend slide out of sight without lingering. Where to eat? Silas thought for a moment. There's a Cantonese restaurant by the river. Their soup is excellent. You've been drinking tea for a week. Time for some proper broth. The Cantonese restaurant was tucked away in an old alley, its entrance unassuming but spacious and bright inside. Silas had booked a table by the window, which overlooked the river. The landlady came over to pour tea and exchanged a few words with him in Hokkien. When the soup arrived and the lid was lifted, white steam obscured the faces across the table. They didn't talk much about the case during the meal. Silas mentioned a cross-border money laundering case he had worked on in the Economic Crime Division. The suspect had hidden bank cards in the interlayer of an antique painting frame. Evelyn listened, smiling occasionally. At the tail end of the meal, the proprietress brought over 2 cups of almond tea. Silas took a couple of sips and set down his spoon. What do you plan to do after tomorrow? Evelyn swallowed the spoonful of sweetness. First, I need to clean up the loose ends at the conglomerate, then, probably take a vacation. Where to? Somewhere by the sea. The farther, the better, a place with no cell signal at all. Silas let out a laugh. That might not suit you. The people at the conglomerate would go crazy. The night had fully darkened by the time they finished eating, and the lanterns by the river stretched their shadows long. Silas drove her back to the riverside mansion, parked downstairs without turning off the engine, and tilted his head. Get a good night's sleep. I'll bring you congee in the morning. Evelyn pushed open the car door, took a couple of steps, then turned back. Silas. Tomorrow morning, I want century egg and lean pork congee. Silas's expression shifted from surprise to amusement, finally settling into a very faint warmth. All right. With or without chopped green onions? With. The elevator went up. After getting home, she went through all the messages on her phone, replied to each with received or okay, then crawled into bed. The fragmented light from the river on the ceiling swayed gently, but tonight, those lights didn't feel so cold. She slept straight through till morning. There was a message from Silas on her phone, sent at 7:33 a.m. Congee is left with the security guard, with the chopped green onions you asked for. I'm heading to the station to drop off Kyle's materials, back in the afternoon. She lay on the pillow for a while, then slowly sat up. Pulling back the curtains, the river shimmered with scattered light, cars streamed across the bridge, and someone was jogging on the boardwalk. She went downstairs to the security booth to pick up the congee. It was wrapped in several layers of insulation, and when she opened it, the steam rushed up, filling her face with the aroma of century egg and lean pork. The chopped green onions were packed separately, fresh and bright green. She sprinkled them in and stirred. Evelyn sat on the bench and ate slowly. After finishing the porridge, she stood up and walked toward the parking lot. In the morning, there was the board meeting. In the afternoon, she had to meet with the Economic Investigation Detachment. As the car drove out of the underground garage, sunlight suddenly flooded in, and she squinted. The green light ahead turned on. She released the brake and followed the flow of cars slowly through the intersection. The river wind poured in through the half-open window, dry, the wind of late autumn. The turbulent undercurrents that had surged were slowly settling, the pond water was finally clear. She could now see every pebble at the bottom. Ahead lay another path. The road was still long, and the sunlight was just right. The next few days settled into a smooth routine. On Wednesday, the legal director delivered the final draft of the indictment materials for Seraphina and Damian. She flipped through the last page and signed her name. On Thursday, attorney Kyle sent over the list of fund flows, and after 3 days of cross-checking, the audit team found everything matched. On Friday, the group's internal network published an official notice, case progress, the amount of recovered funds, and internal control system rectifications. On Friday afternoon, the removal process for Harrison went through its final steps. Stepping out of the meeting room and standing in the corridor, the pale pink dusk painted the skyline, and the entire building felt quieter than usual. That evening, Silas invited her to a Cantonese restaurant by the river. Halfway through the soup, her phone lit up with a message from the Economic Crime Investigation Unit. The cases involving Damian and Seraphina had been formally transferred for prosecution review. Evelyn glanced at it, flipped the phone over, and set it face down on the table. After that meal, the two walked for a long time along the riverside path. Near the observation deck, an elderly couple stood by the railing. The old woman, wrapped in a scarf, leaned against her husband's shoulder. Evelyn watched for a few seconds, and when she turned her head back, Silas was watching too. What do you think, in the end of a lifetime, a person wants most? Evelyn leaned against the railing, her voice light and carried away by the wind. Silas turned his head. Maybe it's not about wanting something, it's about wanting someone to still be there. Fragments of light from the river glimmered in his eyes. The wind loosened a few strands of her hair, and before she could brush them away, Silas gently swept them aside, his fingers grazing the skin near her ear, brief and dry. Evelyn didn't pull away. She stood there, letting the wind and the lingering touch of his fingers fade slowly, then curved her lips into a faint smile. Come on, the wind's picking up. Let's go. Saturday she didn't wake up until after 9, sunlight slipped through the gaps in the curtains. 3 new messages on her phone. Claire asked if she was going to the industry forum, PR said 3 independent media editors wanted to schedule in-depth interviews, and Silas had only one line, nice weather today, remember to go out for a walk. She replied with a sure. Brewed a cup of coffee, sat on the living room floor to soak up the sun, and stared blankly at the river for a while. In the afternoon, she changed clothes, stepped out, and strolled slowly along the riverside path for over an hour. Passing an observation deck, she ran into a young woman in a hoodie printed with a cartoon cat, who let out an "ah" when she saw her. "Are you Evelyn?" The girl looked a little sheepish. "I just think you're really amazing." Evelyn smiled, different from usual, without the weight of plotting or closing a deal, just a gentle curve. The girl asked if they could take a photo together, and Evelyn nodded. After taking the photo, the girl ran off. Evelyn continued walking until she reached the end of the path, where she stopped, faced the river, took a deep breath, and pulled out her phone to text Silas, "I'm out for a walk. It's sunny by the river, but the wind feels nice." She slipped her phone back into her pocket and started heading back. The sound of water and wind behind her mingled together like a song with no lyrics, humming softly. The sun still hung high, and the road stretched long ahead. As she walked, a faint smile curved at the corners of her mouth, as if all the good things in the world were still waiting for her up ahead, and she had just enough time to walk slowly toward them. On Sunday, she went to the cemetery to visit her grandmother. She brought a bunch of white chrysanthemums and a small box of red bean paste glutinous rice balls. She had asked the owner of the Cantonese restaurant to have someone make them. Crouching in front of the grave, she set down the rice balls, placed the chrysanthemums in the vase, and looked at her grandmother's black and white photo on the tombstone. "Grandma, I'm here." The wind on the hillside rustled lowly through the pine and cypress branches. She crouched there for a while, then stood up and walked down the hill. Halfway down, her phone buzzed, a message from Silas. "Seraphina's first court hearing is tomorrow morning. Are you coming?" She replied, "Not going. Everything that needs to be said is already in the evidence. I'll be in the office waiting for the results." On Monday, when the trial began, Evelyn was in her office attending a video conference. At 10:20, her phone lit up. "Silas, Seraphina pleaded guilty in court." She glanced at it, continued the meeting, and after it ended, replied with just 2 words, "Got it." On Tuesday, Damian's trial started. The board strategy meeting dragged on for 3 hours in the morning. When it ended, 3 messages awaited her on her phone. "Silas, Damian pleaded guilty. PR department, media coverage remains stable. Claire, are you free for a casual dinner tonight?" She replied to all 3. On Friday afternoon, the Economic Investigation Unit sent the final notice. All trial proceedings for Damian, Seraphina, and Harrison had concluded, the sentencing phase had begun, and the recovery of involved funds was moving into the enforcement stage. Kyle's extradition process had entered the execution phase. Evelyn stared at the notification lingering on the screen for over 10 seconds before tapping the bookmark icon. She pulled open the curtains, and the afternoon sunlight poured in. Her phone lit up again. "Silas, any plans after work today?" She smiled, and on the screen, her curved lips appeared. "No. Where do you want to go?" The typing indicator above the chat box flickered for a moment, stopped, then started flickering again. "Last time you asked where I wanted to go, and I said someplace by the sea. I checked today, there are still tickets available for this weekend. Want to go?" She stared at those words, the sunlight outside hitting the screen just right. Her thumb hovered for 2 seconds, then pressed down. "Yes." At 5:30 on a Saturday morning, the airport departure hall. She wore a light gray knit top, jeans, and canvas shoes, with her hair tied in a low ponytail, looking like a completely different person from her usual self. Silas stood by the check-in counter, his gaze pausing for a moment, a faint curve forming at the corner of his mouth. "Are you heading off to school or something?" Evelyn looked down at herself. "What, don't I seem like I'm on a business trip?" "Not quite. More like a college student on summer break." As the plane took off, she leaned against the window and looked down. The city shrank beneath her, swallowed by clouds. 2.5 hours later, she transferred to a boat. The sea breeze filled her sleeves, and the water shifted from pale jade to deep blue, then to a purplish hue at the horizon where sea met sky. The window of the island guesthouse room faced directly toward the sea. In the evening, the two took a walk along the seaside path, just as the sun was setting below the horizon, dyeing the entire ocean in shades between orange-red and rose-purple. Evelyn, walking ahead, suddenly stopped, faced the sea, and stretched her arms wide in a lazy stretch. "You sit all day long. You should get someone to massage your shoulders and neck," Silas said from behind. She lowered her arms and turned around, the setting sun gilding his entire figure with a thin layer of gold. "You understand these things? I handled a case once, working with a massage therapist as a witness, and she taught me a few tricks. We can try them when we get back." The two stood side by side watching the sunset. In the distance, a fishing boat slowly sailed by, its wake trailing a long streak of golden light. That evening, she sat by the window eating instant noodles. The steam from the broth left a layer of fog on the glass, and she traced an arc on it with her fingertip. Her phone lay quietly beside her, not a single new notification. Outside the window, the sound of the waves surged in and receded, layer after layer, steady and long. Half asleep and drifting towards slumber, I heard 3 soft knocks on the door. Silas's voice came through the panels. "If you want to watch the sunrise tomorrow morning, I'll be waiting for you at the door at 6. She curved her lips slightly under the covers without getting up, softly humming in the direction of the door. The footsteps faded away into the distance. The sound of the waves carried her consciousness deeper and deeper. Waking up at dawn, the bright line along the horizon was slowly spreading across the sea surface. She pushed the door open and went out, finding Silas leaning against the old banyan tree holding 2 enamel cups. He handed her a cup of instant coffee, should pair well with the sunrise. The two walked along the rocky path to the curved sandy beach and sat down, facing east. The sea was calm as a mirror as the sun rose above the horizon, first a golden rim, then a half-circle, and finally a full round orange-red sun breaking free from the water's surface. Sunlight spread across the entire sea surface, every shade of transition from deep blue to light jade streaked with shattered gold. Seagulls took flight from distant rocks, the sound of their wings skimming the water's surface as they soared into the sky. Evelyn held the enamel cup and watched the entire process in silence, then turned her head to look at Silas. He was also gazing at the sea, his profile illuminated by the morning light. "How is it?" he asked. "It was worth getting up early." She gave a slight smile. They sat on the beach for a long time. The sea breeze grew warmer, and seashell gatherers bent over in the distance, searching for shells. Evelyn lay half reclined, her head resting on her folded arms, gazing at the sky as it faded from the pale pinkish orange of morning to a soft blue. "Silas, how long have you been in economic crime investigation?" "Almost 9 years." She was silent for a moment. "That morning, when you waited for me outside the detention center, was it arranged by the detachment, or did you come on your own?" Silas was slightly taken aback, looking down at the empty enamel cup in his hand. "The detachment wasn't originally supposed to assign my shift. I saw your name on the schedule and swapped with a colleague." She slowly sat up straight and turned to face him. "Why?" "Because I've seen your Lynn family's related party transaction reports for the past 3 years in the case files." Silas set the enamel cup on his knee, looking out at the distant horizon. In the materials submitted by others, Shenhui and Su Man's accounts were balanced, each transaction corresponded to a specific project. But in the supplementary materials you submitted, you retraced the flow of 7 transactions, connecting each one to different shell companies, all eventually converging under Longding International. He turned his head to look at her. "When you submitted that supplementary material, the system showed that it took you only 3 days to organize it. 37 transactions spanning 3 fiscal years, involving 12 legal entities, you finished it in 3 days, and every trail ended with precision." Evelyn's hand paused on the rim of the enamel cup. "I thought something was off back then." Silas turned back to look at the sea. For someone to dismantle and restructure 3 years' worth of accounts in just 3 days, either someone had given her the complete chain in advance, or she had been following this matter closely for a long time. The sea breeze passed between them, carrying the salty mist and the scent of sun-warmed rocks. "Later that night at the engagement party, when I saw you standing on the stage holding a champagne glass and laughing like that," his voice slowed slightly, "I was certain. That kind of smile you had, it's not something someone backed into a corner could pull off. You already knew what they were up to." Evelyn looked down at the enamel mug. The instant coffee at the bottom was finished, leaving only a faint brown stain. She rotated the cup, the rim slowly turning beneath her fingertips. "That supplementary material, I really did keep an eye on it for a long time," she said, her voice as flat as the sea underfoot. "It's just that no one knew I was watching." Silas didn't press her on when it started, nor did he ask how she could stare so long without showing a single emotion. He simply nodded, as if he had already guessed. The sea breeze carried the cries of seagulls once more, distant and fragmented, scattered between the sunlight and the waves. "You're very fast at going through materials," Evelyn said, turning her face to look at him. "The materials that took 3 days to organize, how long did it take you to finish reading them?" Silas thought for a moment. "One night." They locked eyes for a moment. The golden fragments on the sea shimmered and swayed between them. Evelyn smiled, not a broad one, but there was genuinely something melting in her eyes. "You're not so simple either," she said. "And then what happened?" "It was later because of you, the way you do things. In such a short time, you built up the entire layout, accounted for everyone's greed, and didn't waste a single bit of extra effort when closing the net. I just wanted to see what kind of person you would become after this was done." Evelyn tilted her head. "Then did you see it?" Silas looked at her. "I saw it. Just as I thought." She lowered her head with a smile, stood up, and stretched facing the sea before turning around. "Let's head back." didn't you say we were going to have seafood today? The two walked one behind the other along the rocky path back. Canvas shoes stepped across the stone surface wet with seawater, leaving a trail of shallow, damp footprints. The sun had climbed higher, and the light on the sea had shifted from scattered gold to a silvery white. Reaching the entrance of the guest house, Silas pushed open the creaky wooden gate and stepped aside to let her in. Evelyn paused as she passed him, tilting her head to glance at him, the sunlight streaming from behind her traced a bright, soft golden line along her silhouette. With a slight curve of her lips, she gave him a look before turning and stepping into the courtyard. The gate slowly closed behind him, its spring pulling the hinges with a low creak. Seagulls were still flying over the distant sea, their cries scattered by the wind, drifting in fragments into this clear morning. Sea breeze poured in through the open window, carrying the scent of salt and sunlight. Her phone lay quietly beside the pillow, its screen dark. She sat on the stool by the window, facing the endless blue expanse. Another gust of wind swept across the sea, shaking a few bougainvillea petals loose, which drifted lightly past the windowsill. She reached out and caught one, magenta, thin as paper, its edges curled with a hint of withered brown. She watched the petal rest in her palm for a moment, then blew it gently, letting it drift away with the wind. Outside the window, the sea was still glowing silently, spreading from pale jade to deep blue, all the way to that purpling edge of the horizon. Every color lay unfurled beneath the midday sun, open and tranquil. She stood up, closed the window, and left the sea breeze outside. At the group, news kept pouring in. Claire sent a briefing. After an initial 4-day decline, the stock price had begun to stabilize, with institutional investors describing Evelyn's handling of the situation as decisive and professional. The PR department had compiled a 12-page public opinion analysis. The legal director reminded her that at least 3 civil lawsuits were still pending, those involved suppliers and partners were lining up to sue the company. Evelyn read through each one, forwarding what needed to be forwarded and annotating what required instructions. The signal on the island was indeed quite poor, messages twisted and turned through several loops before finding their destination, but she wasn't in a hurry. In the late afternoon, she went to the beach again. The tide had receded further, leaving fine ripples on the exposed wet sand. She took off her shoes and walked barefoot. The sand, warmed by the sun all day, was still soft under her feet. Silas caught up from behind, saying nothing, just walking alongside her. They walked a long stretch before he finally spoke. "Your phone's been buzzing." "I'll deal with it when I get back." "No rush. You really can let things go." She looked down at the footprints she had left behind, each one sinking into the wet sand before being smoothed over by the thin layer of water washing ashore. It's not about letting go, it's about knowing which things are useless to dwell on now, and which things, once missed, are gone forever. Silas didn't respond. They kept walking, the sea breeze puffing up their shirts before letting them fall again. The tide crept higher, gradually erasing the footprints they had left behind, restoring the beach to its untouched state. In the distance, the sun sank another notch. The sky shifted from orange-red to rose-purple, then deeper into ink blue, where a few scattered stars had already emerged, sparse and faint. Evelyn paused to watch for a moment, then said, "Let's go back. The morning boat leaves tomorrow." The two turned and headed back. At the guest house, the landlady had turned on the lights, and a warm yellow glow spilled through the wooden lattice windows, casting shadows on the bougainvillea. As they passed the old banyan tree, Silas suddenly reached out and pushed aside a branch that hung too low, waiting until she had passed before letting it go. The branch snapped back behind her, trembling a few times before slowly coming to rest. That night, lying in bed, she listened to the sound of the waves. Her phone screen flickered occasionally. Silas had sent a photo, taken at today's sunrise. It showed her silhouette holding an enamel cup while gazing at the sea, the morning light dissolving her entire figure into a single shadow. She looked at it for a long time, then replied with a single word, "Good." The other party replied quickly, "It is quite beautiful." She smiled and placed her phone face down beside the pillow. Outside the window, the sound of the waves surged unevenly and then receded. After returning tomorrow, countless messages would be waiting to be dealt with, from the board, legal, public relations, and suppliers. Perhaps more things lurking in the shadows were yet to surface. Although the overseas trader Kyle had been caught, how many parts of the financial network behind him remained unchecked? Would Harrison's people do anything during the trial? Had Gloria really handed over everything? These thoughts floated in the darkness for a while, then were gradually drowned out by the sound of the waves. Let tomorrow's worries wait until tomorrow. She closed her eyes, her breathing gradually growing deeper. The window wasn't fully shut, the night wind slipped through the crack, carrying the salty, briny scent of the sea, gently lifting the curtain a little before letting it fall again. The entire island breathed quietly in the darkness. The last glimmer of light on the distant sea sank into the water, and the boundary between sky and sea blurred completely into a deep blue. More and more stars appeared, densely blanketing the sky above, like something that had been shattered and pieced back together, turned upside down. Evelyn turned over and pulled the blanket closer. The sound of the waves wrapped around her, drawing her deeper into the night. Tonight, there were no dreams.